October 1st, 2019. China celebrates its 70th anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic of China. It's a day of immense significance as the people paid homage to the Communist Party's leadership. After a century of humiliation, China is now marching forward with its newfound confidence and vigor as a new global power.
那我们再回顾这70年，我们都干了什么，取得了什么？更重要的是，下一步我们还需要怎么做？
From a war-battered and poverty-stricken nation on the verge of collapse, to a leading industrial powerhouse and the world's second-largest economy in the span of just 70 years.
I think they can still celebrate the fact that they've had extraordinary success with their economic growth over the last 40 years.
And today, under the leadership of Xi Jinping, China pushes the envelope to achieve what he called the China Dream.
We now have another very capable and very courageous leader, a leader with great vision.
What really accounts for China's meteoric rise as a major global power within 7 decades? Can this dramatic success be sustained in today's challenging global economic environment?
中国人民从此站起来了，在这一伟大事件彻底改变了近代以后100多年中国积贫积弱、受人欺凌的悲惨命运。
With this transformation, what has been gained along the way, what has been lost along the way? Now, as China celebrates its 70th anniversary, has China arrived? Is it still a work in progress?
A picturesque farming village, alluring mountain ranges, breathtaking views of the valleys and the lush green fields greet visitors in this old town of Shidu, some 300 kilometers away from Beijing, China's capital city. This was how the whole of China looked like 70 years ago. A predominantly agricultural country with the majority of its population living in the countryside. That was also what Chinese Communist leader Mao Zedong inherited when he proclaimed the founding of the People's Republic of China on October 1st, 1949. Despite his remarkable success in defeating the nationalist Kuomintang forces and unifying the whole country under the leadership of the Communist Party, China remained a very poor and backward country. More than 80% of the Chinese people lived in absolute poverty.
I would say he inherited a mess. What made the difference was he created something. He created something that China had not seen for nearly 100 years, a united country. It had been divided after the Opium War, Civil War inside, even under the Qing dynasty, and then the revolution, warlords, civil war, invasion by the Japanese. It was one long tale of disasters, wars, poverty, increasingly dismal future for China. China was at its weakest, in fact, during those years of the Japanese invasion and the civil war that followed. I mean, in 1945 to 49, when the nationalists and communists fought, the nationalists were obviously so weak and so corrupt, they had no real chance of defeating, of winning, although nobody quite anticipated the speed at which they fell. But the fact that the communists won is Mao Zedong's creation. He made that possible.
In the 10 years that followed the founding of the People's Republic of China, Chairman Mao set the country on the tremendous growth trajectory. Industrial output was growing double-digit every year. But the great leap forward, the industrialization of China, soon began to falter.
Within the party, when they had disagreements among the leaders, and the mistakes that Mao Zedong made with the great leap forward, and then when his comrades challenged him about that, he didn't like it. He got more and more deeply embroiled in a kind of internal party struggle, which led to the Cultural Revolution.
The Cultural Revolution, however, failed to repair the damage caused by his economic policy of the Great Leap Forward. The Great Leap Forward was Mao's vision of the rapid industrialization of China, but at the expense of agriculture. The failure of the economic experiment brought with it the Great Chinese Famine of 1959, which lasted till 1961. The Cultural Revolution that followed only made the situation worse. The 10-year social experiment crippled the Chinese economy, which led to a prolonged period of turmoil, bloodshed, and starvation. The 65-year-old retiree He Chunlu was only in his teens when the Cultural Revolution was first introduced. But he could see how his family suffered as a result of the policy, which failed to bring about tangible economic benefits to poor people like himself.
小时候生活还是比较艰难，这个主要是缺吃缺穿，条件非常艰难，精神层面的生活可能就更谈不到了，没有多少米粒儿，上面主要是一些米汤，哎，所以呢，我们当时，我母亲说，你看，今天的这个粥啊，不远就有一个米粒儿，不远就一个米粒儿，就说这粥稀呀。就是这个，然后呢，他要把那个米要给我父亲吃，因为他要干活。
69-year-old Li Jing also remembers clearly what it was like to grow up hungry. Those were the days when food was scarce and had to be rationed. The massive famine had caused a drastic decline in the food supply, causing acute starvation among the people.
那时候正赶上中国3年自然灾害的时期，凭粮票，抽烟要凭烟票，所有的一切物资都是一种票证化。那么1毛钱，妈妈给1毛钱，我在郑州的饭店里说来1碗面条，所有人吃面条，都拿手捂住自己的碗，摞到一块吃。 那里边要饭的很多。当年整个中国面临着3年自然灾害，虽然我们解放，虽然我们获得了自由，但是那个时期，那么自然灾害，我们这个国家仍然在痛苦中生活。
During that 10 years, there were zero growth in terms of GDP per capita. And for central and western China, infrastructure had no improvement. It was basically a period of economic stagnation, and also it destroyed education of the whole generation.
According to estimates, the Cultural Revolution killed between 500,000 and 2 million people. It was a massive policy failure and one of the darkest chapters in Chinese history.
Former government leaders, intellectuals, elite professors were persecuted. Many actually were persecuted to death. Many were very much locked up, in confinements, etc. Many committed suicide. And I think the more we think back, the more we become horrified as to how low can these people go in the Great Cultural Revolution.
It was only in December of 1968 that Mao realized that the Cultural Revolution was spiraling out of control. The policy that paralyzed China, politically and economically, finally ended in 1976, following the death of Mao Zedong and the fall of the Gang of Four, a group of Chinese Communist Party members closely associated with Mao. Although the end of the Cultural Revolution came at the cost of so many lives, until today, Mao remains a revered figure in China.
Despite the errors and the miscalculations of the Cultural Revolution and so on, they didn't actually destroy that base of a sense of unity, a sense of oneness of China, a sense of tremendous potential. Even though he got it wrong, the sense was somehow still there.
After his success in reuniting China, Mao Zedong had envisioned that his revolutionary movement would turn the country into a beacon of communism, a prosperous country committed to the communist ideology. He failed. But his failure to realize his vision had paved the way for the rise of a new leader, whose radical reform policies led to the emergence of China as a new economic superpower. The man responsible for China's meteoric rise was 74-year-old Deng Xiaoping, formerly the Secretary General of the Communist Party. But who was Deng Xiaoping? How would his decision to open up China to the world change the country's destiny forever? China's phenomenal transformation into a modern industrialized economy did not happen by accident. It was made possible by the work and ideas of one man, the late Chinese paramount leader, Deng Xiaoping. Standing at just 1.52 meters tall, his diminutive figure belied the strength, vision and fortitude of the man who helped transform China into one of the fastest growing economies in the world. Deng Xiaoping was indeed a giant among equals, towering above the achievements of many other leaders in modern times. With his courage, vision and ideas, he helped lay the foundation for the rise of China into an economic superpower that it is today.
In a way, they learned from the mistakes of Mao Zedong to follow Deng Xiaoping. Deng Xiaoping actually thought for 10 years, he sat down and thought about what went wrong with what had been so successful. Don't forget, Deng Xiaoping was the Secretary General of the party while Mao Zedong was the chairman for 10 years. So he could see from inside something that was tremendously hopeful, tremendous potential, virtually destroyed by, in a way, the madness of this one man. The man who created it also was about to destroy it. And he sat back those 10 years quietly, thinking of how do I remedy this? How do I save China, save the Communist Party from this near ruin that this great man who had created it in the first place had almost destroyed.
Victor Gao is a vice president of the Center for China and Globalization, a think tank in Beijing. But he was previously an English translator to the late paramount leader Deng Xiaoping during the 1980s. Victor observed firsthand that despite Mr. Deng's demeanor as a calm and gentle old man, he commanded tremendous respect from his peers with his unwavering determination to achieve his vision.
He was a man of great wisdom, and he was a man with great vision for China. I've described Deng Xiaoping as the prophet for the Chinese nation, mainly because he saw where most of us could not see, and he pointed out a way of development which eventually was proven not only to be the correct one.
Deng Xiaoping took up the mantle of the leadership of the Communist Party at the age of 74. At that age, Victor felt that Deng was a man in a hurry to achieve something for the country. His main priority was to lift China out of its economic rut and pull millions of his people out of poverty.
And he knew time was not long left for him. So he needed to act very fast. He had no time to waste. And he also believed that China, or the Chinese nation, would have no time to waste anymore. Everyone need to wake up. Everyone need to have that sense of crisis, a sense of urgency. Everyone need to move forward as quickly as he or she can.
Deng Xiaoping appreciated that he was not building from something from scratch. He was building from something that was there but went wrong, and he's remedying that.
And so he did. In 1978, Deng Xiaoping abandoned many communist doctrine and embraced free market principles instead. From state ownership and a centrally planned economy to one based on market-oriented reforms. In other words, Deng went against the grains of communist ideology by legalizing private ownership. He allowed market competition and opened China to the world through foreign investments and trade. He famously remarked, "It does not matter whether they are black cats or white cats. So long as they catch mice, they're good cats."
There were the four dragons in Asia, Singapore, Hong Kong, Taiwan. So they developed very fast and quickly became the manufacturing center of the world. So Deng saw that and he wants to follow a similar path. So he adopted very similar industrial policies by building domestic manufacturing base and using agriculture to subsidize industry. So by doing that, he lowered the cost of economic input for industrial development, and also he opened border. He opened the coastal provinces, especially through Shenzhen. And by doing that, he captured this export, this rising export economy, and that was a breaking point for China.
It ended up setting up special economic zones, getting China started on a trajectory of manufacturing success, of exporting to the rest of the world. It lifted over 600 million Chinese out of extreme poverty. It's a kind of economic development that gave the nation control over its own destiny.
He had recognized that that was one of the mistakes of Mao Zedong, to have closed up the economy. If you don't have the capitalism or the methodologies and technologies of capitalism to create the wealth, what is there to redistribute? We must get to the stage where we must create wealth. And what he did was he basically opened the doors to say, let everybody who can create wealth, create wealth. Only then we have a chance to build a social society. And Chinese people, being what they are, with all their entrepreneurial instincts, having been suppressed for a while, now is being told that this is okay now, go ahead. Have you got new ideas? They can be entrepreneurial, go ahead. And my goodness, they did.
33-year-old Alex Ma works in his family's printing and packaging business in Shenzhen. His father and uncle, who hailed from Chaozhou province, first started up their business in Hong Kong in the 1970s. But they took a gamble by moving their production to Shenzhen on the new promise of the special economic zones designed by Deng Xiaoping. Back in the 1980s, Shenzhen was a fishing village, dwarfed by the mature and liberal economy of its neighbor, Hong Kong. Nobody knew if it was going to work out. But today, Alex has seen how the place and the business has grown from strength to strength, thanks to Mr. Deng's foresight.
到最尾，國家又啱啱講緊經濟改革開放呢樣嘢，咁其實都冇話呢個預知能力話一定係好嘅，咁樣做落去其實都係順勢而做嚟嘅，又冇話冇話我哋睇到10年之後會發生啲咩事，咁呢個就的確係可能話冇諗過深圳嘅發展可以咁快，同埋佢嘅改革真係咁好咯。我爹哋亦都覺得翻祖國發展係好啦，咁亦都聽我哋國家領導人所講啦，咁咪翻嚟發展咯。因為隨住經濟改革開放同埋嗰個成個市場成個全球嘅經濟穩步上升，咁我哋啲叫做員工啊，我哋生意都越做越大咯。
And so Deng's gamble in converting a planned economy into a market economy paid off. From a per capita income of just $40 in 1978, it has now risen to more than $10,000. The country's economy has also expanded at an average rate of 9.5% over the last 40 years. The changes that Deng had initiated have transformed China from one of the world's poorest countries into the world's second biggest economy. As a testimony to the success of Deng's reform efforts, Shenzhen has surpassed Hong Kong in GDP numbers for the first time in history. And Shenzhen's success formula has been implemented in second and third tier cities across China.
Shenzhen turned out to be the most successful special economic zone in the Chinese experience. And by today, a small fishing village in Shenzhen had already blossomed into a mega city. Shenzhen is larger than Hong Kong in terms of size, in terms of the size of the population, but also very importantly, starting in 2018, Shenzhen's GDP is already larger than Hong Kong. So this is truly a revolutionary development for Shenzhen.
However, in the spring of 1989, pro-democracy protests broke out on Tiananmen Square, casting a pall over China's nascent market economy and liberal reforms. Chinese students had begun to demand for political reforms amid the ambitious economic reforms spearheaded by Deng. The central government, however, viewed the demonstrations as an existential challenge and went on to crush the movement.
Because the Tiananmen era was that they were so afraid that they opened up too fast and people were getting the wrong idea and the wrong direction, so they had to crush it. But then people began to be fearful about moving forward.
Deng left no room for doubt on China's way forward. The red line was cast in stone and could not be crossed. While he was prepared to allow for market reforms, there can be no challenge to the party's rule. But that has not stopped China's economic ascent as the next generation of Chinese leaders continue to ride on this expansionist wave, taking communist China to the halls of the World Trade Organization, integrating China deeper into the global economy. When Deng Xiaoping retired from politics in 1992, he had fulfilled a mission no other leader of the 20th century could have ever done. His groundbreaking reforms and his decision to open up China to the world have left a lasting impact on the country. It's not surprising then that his death in February 1997 did not lead to the abandonment of his economic policies. In fact, it further inspired the government to continue the material progress for the nation under new leader Jiang Zemin. Together with economic czar Zhu Rongji, they both took China to new heights.
And he sold the idea to a new generation of people who now are the leaders. He says successors, the generation from Jiang Zemin to Xi Jinping, are all, in a way, products of that new way of thinking. To build on the revolution that has succeeded, but constantly tweak it, make it better, improve on it, to ensure that it takes full advantages of all the opportunities available by opening up.
I think that era was also strengthened in terms of its signal opening up by Premier Zhu Rongji, because he's probably the bravest reformer at the time. He conducted the state-owned enterprise reform, which caused millions of unemployment, but he somehow pulled it through, and with a lot of political support domestically. He's very charismatic.
46-year-old Zhong Fuquan is very much a self-made businessman who's very successful in his own right. he's tried his hand at different industries, from trading cultural arts and crafts to agriculture and eggs production. Zheng, who grew up in Gansu, one of the poorest landlocked provinces in northwest China, is the owner of a few businesses and sits on advisory boards of national trade organizations. Zheng's success mirrored the country's phenomenal growth over the last decades. He attributes his success to the environment and circumstances in those years, where China was rapidly opening up to the world, while taking the best of what other more advanced countries could offer.
环境很重要，你周围的都是什么人？都是一些战略性的人物，或者都是一些很有眼光的一些人物。那我们跟着他，整天在一起，各种聊天啊，各种学习，那就有很多这种，这不是我个人的思想啊，这是你周围一个环境和一个圈子的一个影响。就这些朋友，我认为他们给我带来了全世界的一些各种各样的信息，包括在国内怎么来发展、copy。和学习和研究，或者是在改进一些国内外比较，尤其是国外比较好的商业模式。
所以就是向西方学习，怎么样学习？那么打开国门，就是欢迎外商来投资，我们这个去做贸易，而学习西方的先进技术。
A major breakthrough came in December 2001 when China formally joined the World Trade Organization, or WTO. Its ascension into the WTO clearly signified China's deeper integration into the global economy and cemented its position as the world's factory, attracting numerous manufacturing companies from advanced economies into China.
Joining the World Trade Organization, they suddenly took advantage of the whole opening of the world's markets to Chinese entrepreneurship and access to all the world's resources. Following the rules, all the countries open up their markets to China, particularly the developed world of the United States and Western Europe. And those markets was really what made it possible for the Chinese economy to take off in such a rapid pace from then onwards. For the next 15 years or so, it just shot up. And you can see the figures they show that after joining WTO, how things move very, very fast, faster than anybody expected.
However, China's blistering growth, averaging 9.8% per annum, as well as its economic expansion that went on at such a breakneck speed, had begun to raise red flags. As it got richer, there were growing concerns over corruption and income inequality.
So one could say that that whole generation attempted to keep the economic engine growing, and that the real opportunity for genuine reform only came towards the end of that era, with Hu Jintao and Wen Jiabao looking for ways to repair a system that had clearly grown unbalanced. Was investment too much an engine of growth? Was the government bloat in state-owned enterprises already too large? Was the environment too degraded? Had income inequality risen too high?
This wealth, this new wealth that was created, was corrupting the party itself. Now this is really dangerous.
It was against this backdrop that the leadership baton was passed onto the fifth generation. In November 2012, 59-year-old princeling Xi Jinping, the son of a communist revolutionary veteran, became China's new paramount leader. Shortly upon assuming power, President Xi Jinping embarked on an all-out anti-corruption drive aimed at rooting out corruption within the party. In 5 years, more than 200,000 high and low-ranking officials, known as tigers and flies, were prosecuted. Former Chongqing boss and member of the Politburo, Bo Xilai. A former member of the Politburo Standing Committee, Zhou Yongkang. and former vice chairman of the Central Military Commission, General Xu Caiho. In spite of growing criticisms that his anti-corruption drive was aimed at getting rid of his rivals and those who are resistant to his policies, the campaign has won praises from the people.
过去就你必须要吃喝喝，必须要给人拉拢，啊，必须要怎么才走得通。现在一律不许了，不可能了，你就老老实实办事。这个当官的你必须为老百姓办事，老百姓你不需要给当官的送钱。 民营企业的话，你也不需要给当官的送什么钱，当官的相反应该帮助为你服务。
I conducted several surveys in rural China, and everywhere you go, people they just love Xi. They think it's easier now to get their things done in the government, and they think anti-corruption is a good thing.
Having struck the right note at the very start of his leadership, Xi Jinping launched several signature policies in quick succession. These included Made in China 2025, a strategic blueprint to upgrade the country's manufacturing capabilities. This would include the goal of rising dominance in the fields of technology, IT, and robotics. The Belt and Road Initiative, an ambitious global development strategy to build infrastructure and connectivity in 152 countries. These are all part of his desire to achieve the China Dream and the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation.
人民对美好生活的向往是我们的最高目标，也就是我们的这个执政目标。我觉得实现中国梦，就是为了让全体人民都过上幸福的生活。所以这就是习近平讲的中国特色嘛，就是大家都富裕。
China dream is not one person dream, not only his own idea, but just represent all the people of China. So the China dream for the at the macro level, when we are talking about it, I think it should be understand as the rejuvenation, the renaissance of China's civilization is a long history. That China may come as in Xi Jinping's own word, that we are come closer to the center of the world stage.
2 years into Xi Jinping's term, unexpected headwinds appeared on the horizon. In 2014, the Chinese economy grew at its slowest pace in 24 years, although it still clocked in a respectable 7.4% growth. And in 2016, the United States voted in a president who accused China of stealing jobs from America and cheating on trade deals. For all his tough anti-China rhetoric on the election campaign trail, nobody really believed that Donald Trump will make good on his threats on China. But he did. In July 2018, President Trump slapped taxes on billions of dollars worth of Chinese imports. And the two countries have been engaged in round after round of tit-for-tat retaliation measures since. And with no foreseeable end in sight to the trade war, Chinese manufacturers like Alex Ma are getting increasingly worried.
但係製造業如果純粹講製造業方面嘅話，我就唔係太樂觀。如果我哋中美貿易戰繼續保持去打嘅，咁我哋啲客戶我相信會一直會減少，咁好辛苦咯，應該會做得。
The Chinese economy has undoubtedly been hit. GDP for the second quarter of 2019 grew at 6.2%, the lowest rate since quarterly reports began in 1992.
Oh, the impact will be profound. In fact, you feel the impact right now. Probably when you are in China, most people want to talk to you about US-China trade war because it's affecting people's daily life, it's affecting sentiment, and that's affecting stock market.
And as China celebrates its 70th anniversary of the founding of the nation, What do these troubling times mean for the Chinese people and President Xi Jinping's lofty China dream?
When President Xi Jinping started his term with his vision of the China dream, 中国梦, it galvanized and inspired an entire nation. It conjured hope and self-confidence. But as the world's most populous country, some 1.4 billion people, China has different age groups, different dialects, different religions. Can it be one China dream for everybody? How will Xi Jinping's vision propel the nation forward?
Power, wealth, and respect. That's what Chinese leader Xi Jinping has envisioned for his country and his 1.4 billion population when he took over the mantle of leadership in 2012. Just weeks after he was installed as the Secretary General of the Communist Party, Xi came up with a slogan, the China Dream, and the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. His key objective, to achieve prosperity at home and respect on the world stage, a vision of an economically prosperous and militarily strong nation.
Great means, in the eyes of the Chinese, is to be respected, to be looked up to as a civilization or as a power, as a wealthy country, for all sorts of reasons, but people look up to China with respect, admiration or something like that. I think that's what the Chinese believe, that China has been treated that way for a long time, most of the time. They have their downs, but when they're doing well, people respect it and admire China. And for 100 odd years, they were really down. So now they want to go back to the position when people will respect China. I think most Chinese leaders and intellectuals and so on want to restore that position.
Evidence has shown that China has already gained international respect and global admiration for all its achievements over the last 40 years. From one of the poorest countries in the world, it's now on the verge of joining the ranks of a high-income country. From an economy that was based on agriculture, it has now established itself as a global technology and manufacturing powerhouse, contributing to nearly 30% of the world's economic growth. It has also successfully lifted 850 million people out of poverty, and is on target to eradicate absolute poverty by the year 2020. China today is also the world's largest trading nation and an economy that's only second biggest in the world after the US. For Xu Sitao, who had gone through the Cultural Revolution, he's happy to witness the country's rapid transformation. And he attributes that to the drive and resilience of its people to be among the best in the world.
Many people like me could never envisage today, right? We have been consistently underestimating China's economic potentials. And probably until today, I'm still underestimating China's economic resilience. That's number one. Number two, in many ways, I think society has become a lot more open. So that's the second achievement. Third achievement is really this continued drive. I think that's very different from many other countries. And there's still a very strong catch-up mentality.
I think China comes from a very underdeveloped country with a poverty rate is so high. Now we really improved the wealth of the whole generation. We really, put China into middle income country level. So in that sense, that's the single biggest achievement of China.
31-year-old Fan Yue and his wife Shuang Yue, who run a skating and snowboarding school for children, are not particularly aware of the China Dream slogan. Still, they feel very inspired by the government's commitment to achieve the best for the country and are willing to partake in this common vision.
我昨天其实专门查了一下，然后它主要是说是这个国家复兴，国家富强，然后民族复兴，人民幸福。我觉得这个话题比较空泛，所以说我们觉得就是每一个人去做自己就可以，然后把自己贡献自己的力量，然后让自己的生活好一点就可以了。因为现在我们觉得国家特别好，所以也没有说是去很应试的去响应口号，只要就是知道自己是谁，然后做自己该做的事情就行。
因为我的父母他是还是比较就是说你要先入党啊，然后先怎么样，然后在我们看来可能就觉得这个不是特别的就是必要，然后就觉得我们可以做自己喜欢的事儿更开心。
But China's newfound wealth and confidence have also been matched by its growing assertiveness overseas. It has been flexing its muscle in every sphere, including its maritime claims in the South China Sea and East China Sea. Beijing has also been moving rapidly to upgrade its military hardware and expand its powers overseas. Xi's government has also invested heavily in the Belt and Road Initiative to expand its economic reach and soft power abroad. Domestically, Xi Jinping has emerged as the most powerful leader since the era of Mao Zedong. Apart from his position as president and secretary-general of the party, he has also taken full control of the military, assuming the title of Supreme Commander. And in a marked departure from party tradition, Xi Jinping successfully removed the term limits for president, something which former leader Deng Xiaoping tried to prevent. The constitutional amendment would now allow him to stay in office as president indefinitely.
If you're doing the job and the job is not finished, you continue. Why not? I do not believe that he's took off the limits so that he can be president for life. I think that's just people's, way of making fun of him, because I don't think that's on his mind. What is on his mind is that these limits are artificial. They borrowed from somewhere, but it really depends on the job you have to do. And I think he sees himself, rightly or wrongly, that he faced a party that was almost about to self-destruct. And he has said almost a sacred task of saving that party in order to save China, that maybe 5 years, 10 years, not good enough.
Given the vast changes and the rapid changes, and also the way that Xi Jinping has led the party in fighting against the corruption, the greater continuity and stability we may have actually will help China the more, rather than, for example, the uncertainty or the unpredictability, especially at the very top level of the Chinese leadership.
But 2019 has proven to be a challenging year for President Xi. China today has to battle challenges on many fronts. Ethnic tensions in Xinjiang continue to simmer as international human rights groups keep up the pressure on the Chinese authorities' handling of the Uyghur Muslims. Xi is also facing a challenge to his authority from China's special administrative region, Hong Kong. Months of anti-government protests by pro-democratic forces have threatened to undermine political stability in the former British colony. The festering trade war with the United States has also hit its economy hard, raising the specter of another global recession as trade volumes plunge and major companies pause their investments. But many in China are not worried.
我想这又是两方面，任何事情都不是单方面的。一方面呢，我们信心越来越大，关键在什么？你看看这几年我们在这个创新、发展高科技，还有是产业转型方面做了不少，而且有相当大的成就。你不要说深圳了，好多城市做的都不错。再一个，我们人工智能现在发展也不错。 而且人工智能现在，你看世界最大的我忘了是50家还是多少家人工智能领先者，美国17家，中国10家，那其他欧洲、日本都落得很后面了。所以我们在这方面很有信心。当然，现在美国对中国要强了啊，他不允许你这样，但这是挑战总归有，但是我们这方面有顺着这个路走，我们是有把握。
This trade war also has some positive impact on China because trade war is a stress test. Financial institutions, they need to undertake stress test when asset values coming down, whether your institution can withhold such external pressure. Same for China. This trade war, I think, allows policymakers to look at reform agenda.
The scale and grandeur of the 70th anniversary military parade in Tiananmen was truly a sight to behold. But even as President Xi Jinping and his team looked on his countrymen with confidence and pride, the challenges facing the country ahead are real and deep-rooted. But it's something that it is always ready and willing to face head-on.
We are preparing for the next 70 years and many, many more years to come beyond that. I think China is, after all, having the longest continuous civilization with 5,000 years of recorded history, and China is the only never interrupted civilization in the world.
I would say that the dream is still the same dream. How do you make China great again? And in the last 70 years, after all the ups and downs of the different periods, this part of it, I think, has really achieved, really succeeded in sinking roots in the minds and hearts of most Chinese people. And there is, and as long as that is there, there's always hope.
As I talk to different generations of Chinese nationals, those who lived through the hardships of the Cultural Revolution, and those who were born in the 80s, the 90s, who were beneficiaries of Deng Xiaoping's economic reforms, one thing that struck me was their self-confidence. Confidence in their own ability that is very much aligned with their belief in the country's ability. They are all keenly aware of how far China has come since 1949. Many of them did not believe they would see this transformation in their lifetime. When talking about current challenges, the US-China trade war intentions, for example, their responses are consistently measured. China, according to them, has been facing obstacles and hardships at every turn in their 5,000 years of civilization, and not just on this occasion of their 70th anniversary. This is but a small hiccup on the spectrum of time.
今天，社会主义中国巍然屹立在世界东方，没有任何力量能够撼动我们伟大祖国的地位，没有任何力量能够阻挡中国人民和中华民族的前进步伐。